Elena Whitfield had built one of the fastest-growing technology companies in America before turning 35. Investors admired her intelligence, employees respected her discipline, and competitors feared her relentless determination. Yet, behind the headlines and magazine covers was a woman who had stopped believing that people could genuinely care about her rather than her wealth. When her longtime assistant convinced her to accept a blind date arranged by mutual friends, she agreed only to stop the constant pressure. The meeting was scheduled at an elegant mountain resort after one of Elena's business conferences. She arrived wearing a tailored red dress, expecting to meet another executive, attorney, or investor. Instead, she saw a tall man standing quietly near the fireplace, wearing a red flannel shirt, faded jeans, and worn leather boots. Beside him stood a smiling little boy holding a toy dinosaur. "You must be Elena," the man said politely. "I'm Jack Turner." She forced a smile. "You brought your son?" Jack nodded. "The babysitter canceled. The resort has a children's activity center, so Sam will be there while we have dinner." Sam waved politely. "Nice to meet you, Miss Whitfield." His manners impressed Elena more than his father did. After Sam disappeared with a staff member, Jack pulled out her chair before taking his own seat. The waiter poured water while silence filled the table. "So," Elena asked, "what exactly do you do?" "I'm a carpenter." She blinked. "Only a carpenter?" Jack smiled without taking offense. "I design and build custom homes, mostly for families." "I see." She had expected someone whose achievements matched hers. Instead, she found herself wondering how this date had ever been arranged. Throughout dinner, she spent more time checking emails than making conversation. Jack didn't seem bothered. He asked about her company, charitable foundation, and favorite places to travel. His questions were thoughtful, but she answered with short, distracted replies. Finally, she asked, "Don't you ever wish you'd done something bigger?" Jack looked out the window where snow gently covered the mountains. "I think raising my son into a good man is pretty big." She couldn't relate. "My schedule barely leaves room for weekends. You should make time for vacations, for life." His calm answer irritated her. People constantly told her to slow down, yet none of them carried the responsibility of leading thousands of employees. "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple," Jack replied quietly. "It's important." The conversation became awkward. When dinner ended, Elena decided this would certainly be their last meeting. She thanked him politely as they stepped outside into the cold evening. Snowflakes drifted through the mountain air, while luxury SUVs lined the resort entrance. Then tires suddenly screeched across the icy road. A black SUV slid sideways, blocking the exit. Another vehicle stopped behind them. Four masked men jumped out carrying rifles. Everyone froze. Guests screamed and rushed toward the hotel. Security guards reached for their radios, but one gunman fired into the air. "Nobody move." The crowd instantly dropped to the ground. One attacker pointed directly at Elena. "Take the CEO." She felt her legs refuse to move. Jack noticed immediately. Without raising his voice, he stepped slightly in front of her. "Stay behind me." She stared at him. "This isn't your fight." He never looked away from the approaching gunman. "It is now." The first attacker grabbed Elena's arm. Before anyone realized what happened, Jack exploded into motion. He trapped the man's wrist, twisted the weapon away, and struck him once across the jaw. The attacker collapsed unconscious into the snow. The second criminal rushed forward. Jack pivoted, avoided the rifle, swept the man's legs, and disarmed him with smooth, practiced movements that lasted only seconds. The remaining kidnappers stopped. One stared in disbelief. "Who is this guy?" Jack calmly positioned himself between Elena and the rifles still pointed toward them. His breathing remained steady. His eyes never stopped scanning every movement. He wasn't panicking. He was calculating. Bullets suddenly cracked through the mountain air. Jack grabbed Elena's hand and pulled her behind a thick pine tree just before rounds shattered the stone walkway where she had been standing. She looked at him with complete disbelief. You're not a carpenter." "I am now," he answered calmly. He studied the surrounding terrain, noticing narrow trails leading into the forest, abandoned maintenance buildings farther uphill, and several blind spots the attackers hadn't secured. Every instinct he had spent years trying to forget returned in an instant. The kidnappers advanced through the falling snow. Jack quietly whispered, "Stay close to me." For the first time since becoming one of the most powerful CEOs in the country, Elena placed her trust not in money, influence, or security, but in the quiet single father she had underestimated only an hour earlier. Jack led Elena through the snow-covered forest, keeping low as gunfire echoed behind them. Every few seconds, he stopped, listened, and changed direction, making it impossible for the kidnappers to predict where they were heading. Elena struggled to keep up, but she trusted him completely. Now, the man she had dismissed as just a carpenter moved with the confidence of someone who had survived impossible situations before. Ahead stood an abandoned ski patrol cabin. Jack quietly pushed Elena inside and secured the heavy wooden door with an iron bar. He quickly searched the room, finding an emergency radio, climbing rope, and an old flare launcher. "They'll find us," Elena whispered. "Eventually," Jack replied. "Our job is to make sure we're still standing when they do." Moments later, footsteps surrounded the cabin. One of the kidnappers kidnappers shouted, "Come out! You're trapped!" Jack remained calm. He handed Elena the emergency radio. "If I tell you to run, don't look back. I'm not leaving you. You have hundreds of employees waiting for you. Your life matters. So does yours." For a brief second, they looked at each other in silence. The front window suddenly shattered as two kidnappers forced their way inside. Jack reacted instantly, firing the flare launcher directly into the room. The bright flash temporarily blinded the attackers. Before they could recover, he disarmed one man and knocked the other unconscious with precise controlled strikes. Outside, the remaining criminals opened fire, but the sound of approaching helicopter blades interrupted them. State police had finally traced Elena's emergency security beacon. Realizing they were outnumbered, the kidnappers fled into the mountains, only to be intercepted minutes later by officers arriving from both sides of the valley. Within moments, every member of the kidnapping crew was arrested. As paramedics checked everyone for injuries, Elena walked toward Jack. His hands were scraped, his jacket was torn, and exhaustion showed on his face. But his first question wasn't about himself. "Can someone check on my son, Sam?" He was at the resort. A staff member smiled. "He's safe." He never stopped saying his dad would come back. Minutes later, Sam ran across the snow and hugged Jack tightly. Elena watched the reunion with tears in her eyes. Wealth, power, and success had never impressed her as much as that single moment between father and son. A week later, she visited Jack's workshop, not to offer him money, but to thank him. She donated to the veterans charity he quietly supported and invited him to oversee the construction of affordable homes for military families through her foundation. Jack accepted on one condition: "We do it to help people, not for headlines." Elena smiled. Agreed. She had gone to the blind date expecting to judge an ordinary single dad. Instead, she met a humble hero whose courage, integrity, and love for his son reminded her that true greatness is never measured by status or wealth. It is revealed by the choices a person makes when someone else's life is in their hands.